You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.
This week on The Dan Nicholl Show, an extension of what has been something of a theme. The fact that I rope in people to join me who are not just enormously famous, but also happen to be really, really good mates. And in this case, probably as close a mate as I've had on the course of the show thus far since our move into the world of podcasting. He is one of the great chefs of South Africa. He is one of the great television stars of modern times. And most importantly, he's a fellow traveller and wine lover. David Higgs, welcome.
Thank you. Quite the intro.
Working on it for hours.
Yeah.
It's, I think when we first met, there was certainly a level of David Higgs fame. You were David Higgs, the chef. You'd been South African Chef of the Year. You were this guy who could walk into a kitchen and 3 minutes later, magic emerged. But in the gap since then, there's been television, which has been massive. There's been the fact that every 8 minutes you open a restaurant. So there is that as well. And the life of David Higgs has changed quite dramatically in that short space of time. How much of that was predicted? How much was it planned? Or did it all just kind of unfold?
Yeah, coming to Joburg was a massive game changer for me. And you'll remember that because I came for a braai at your house. Actually, it wasn't a braai. It was a lovely meal. People thought I'd lost my mind. We've had this discussion many times, leaving Stellenbosch award-winning restaurants, blah, 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 to come to a Radisson, And that really wasn't a long-term plan for me. I've always really been one to say, there's never an end goal for me. There's never a goal for something. Because I find when there's a goal, there might be blinkers, I think you've got to be open to anything at any time. And that was the beauty of coming to Joburg. So I was open to it. The time was right. And, so there was that. The interesting thing about Joburg was that I got to Joburg, Chef of the Year. You mentioned all the accolades and everything else. Nobody knew David Higgs was, to be honest with you. And I was, it was kind of a relief in a way. It was sort of a new start for me in many ways, both personally and professionally. And I think it would have been quite arrogant of me to try and go to Joburg and then just open an award-winning restaurant, let's say. But I went there, went to the Radisson, felt it out, went to the Saxon for another 4 years, felt it out, made connections, and then obviously got into what is now Marble with Gary and Nicholl. But to answer your question about sort of being how far I've sort of come in specifically the last 15 years, because it's been 15 years in Joburg now, sport had a massive part to do with that. Yes, cooking and all of that. But in this country, sport reigns supreme. It really does. So got involved with the Epic, got involved with incredible goodwill around the Epic, around sport, and that's what triggered it, And lockdown, the insanity of lockdown,
which we will come to, because you in lockdown was one of the most special things on the internet. The move up. If you speak to most people in Cape Town, I remember my university days, which is going back a little, and they explained to me the Cape Townians would explain to me about Johannesburg, which I didn't know, I hadn't been to. I'd come straight down to university from Zimbabwe. People would say to me that Johannesburg is a collection of interconnected mine dumps covered in barbed wire and people running around firing semi-automatic weapons at each other. It didn't really sell it to me. It wasn't the greatest piece of marketing. Yeah. And people in Cape Town generally don't like coming to Johannesburg. And you're a wonderful exception because you found a real spiritual home up here.
Yeah, and I've always wondered what it is, what it is about Joburg, and that very first interview that I came up to do. I actually didn't even go to the interview before I said yes. I arrived at this Radisson hotel, and there was a pool party, a Heineken pool party, I think it was, and there were 300 beautiful people, and it was integrated, and it was vibey, and I spent 2 hours chatting to a young black architect by the name of Benedict, which I'd never done in my life, embarrassingly. And I was 40 years old. And I phoned the guy that I was doing the interview with, and I just said to him, listen, I'm here. I like what's going on here. And then when I did my book, Mile 8, there was a writer involved, Vilna Adriaanse, a very good friend of mine, and I said, what is it about Joburg? And she said, you must understand that Joburg exists because of the gold rush. There's always opportunity here, and nothing has changed. And she's right, nothing has changed. And I think the beauty of Joburg now is that so many people are leaving and making out different choices, life choices, which leaves even more opportunity, because it is an incredibly vibrant city. And what makes Joburg vibrant? I can tell you now what makes Joburg vibrant. When you look at places like New York and London and other melting pots, it's always about melting pots from around the world. But Johannesburg is a melting pot of East African, West African, Central African, not so much North African, but and that brings fashion, art, food, culture. I mean, that's the vibrancy of Joburg,
And there's no better place to see that than if you walk into Marble. And I remember in the build-up to you opening this restaurant, where not for the first time in your life, everyone thought you'd gone mad. You were saying goodbye to the Saxon, this extraordinary high-end home to fine cuisine, and you'd found some builder, construction guy, and you were going to open what seemed to be like a really high-end spur. And what are you doing? This is madness. And we spent a lot of time. We did a little bit of cycling, me very slowly and largely falling off. And I saw the vision come to light through your eyes. And I think you kind of had an idea of what you wanted to do with Marble. But I would venture that even you and Gary and Dino, your partners, didn't have any idea just quite what an impact you were going to have, not just on the food scene of Johannesburg, but on the social scene, because it has become an iconic place to go and hang out and celebrate the best of Johannesburg.
Absolutely. And is it ever the intention? I mean, do you ever intend to do it at such a scale? Or anything really? I mean, yes, I like I said to you, I think people have goals and visions, and that's fine. But I think the beauty of Marble and Saint and Zoo and everything that we've done is that we've grown into it, and we've spotted an opportunity, and Gary's very good at that, and sort of I'm the handbrake in the relationship, that's for sure. Like I'm always very cautious, and I don't want to start again. I'll be honest with you. Like I love what we've created, and I'm fearful, but there is opportunity at every turn, So the restaurants were sort of natural, a natural sort of progression, and we found ourselves a niche. But lockdown gave us the I don't know, it gave us the different angle, with a petrol station. We found ourselves very vulnerable. We were restaurants. We were cooking on fire. Our food wasn't really suited to takeaways, and we didn't really want to. I don't want to say cheapen the brand, but we didn't want to, discount our brand. So through Gary's sort of management of going through lockdown, we got through safely. And but during that process, we said, okay, guys, we can't just rely on this. We need to maybe just look at a different angle. All our eggs were in one basket, and it was time to just relook that. And that's how the pantry was born, and the petrol station. And it's what a journey that's been, because that's just gone nuts.
If you're listening to this somewhere around the world, you haven't seen the pantry in Johannesburg. Imagine a spaza shop that went to private school. It's just this amazing place that's always full, and it was an offshoot of lockdown, and then now more pantries springing up around the country. But I think most people out of lockdown will take a completely different story from you, because the David Higgs we knew going into lockdown, he's this ridiculously good-looking guy. He's always effortlessly cool, but there was very much kind of a serious side to David Higgs. And then we saw this complete clown who was almost certainly on narcotics jump onto Instagram. And I say this seriously, you got a lot of people through lockdown, because David Higgs on Instagram was the single best thing on the internet, as suddenly this class clown joker character burst free, and you just seem to be having so much fun.
Yeah, I remember. I actually went through the photographs the other day, and I remember one of the first photographs I sent was day 2 or day 3, and I sent it to you, and I was lying on my back. I don't know what the context of the story was, but you wanted to do a story in lockdown, and we were chatting, and I was lying on my back in the pantry next to my washing machine with my dog looking at me, thinking, okay, what's next? Where is this going? But Dan, my school I don't want to call it a career, but my schooling, I was very involved with drama, and I absolutely loved being on stage and loved specifically making people laugh. I don't think I was particularly good at drama itself, but when you get into business, like I have massive anxiety, and for me, it's about not wanting to let people down. It's wanting to look after people. So it was the first time in, how long was it then? In many, many years that I didn't have that anxiety. So there was different anxiety, but I knew that our business was sound and safe. So I could really relax and be myself after so many years. And it took a while, and it just got more and more nuts as it went on. But the important thing that you've said there is that you don't realize until afterwards how many lives you touch, and what people are going through, and that made it incredibly special. Yeah,
And it was therapy for yourself as well, getting through a really
absolutely.
difficult time. And that's something that we've spoken to a number of. We had Nick Rabinovitz on the show not that long ago. He was talking about his depression and the journey that he has gone through. And often people aren't aware that the guys they see in the spotlight, oh, look, there's David Higgs. He's got all these cool restaurants. He's got this amazing life. Everything must be fabulous for him. That does not exclude you from being somebody who can have to deal with things that many other people do. And I think seeing somebody like you who's been really successful, but also has to deal with anxiety, I think a lot of people can be helped by that, by realizing, you know what, there are other people going through this, and there are other people who are experiencing what we are.
Absolutely. We're all going through something, like we must never be naive or selfish enough to think that it's only us, and we're probably going through a lot less than most, and that I've realized along the way. But anxiety can eat at you, and COVID in a way made it a lot worse. I came out the worst for it, and I don't know. We all have our speculations on why that is, but a lot of people did actually come out with a bit of anxiety. But yeah, again, you just need to talk. You need to be open, and there's medication for it, because otherwise it will just eat you up. And there's no point in that.
You also have to find that safe space, that outlet, and for you, it is very much bicycles. And there's not many mornings that go by without a social media post of you out on a bike with some mates, eating up the roads at high speed. What people might be surprised by, there's a photo of you that I try and post as often as possible on social media, and then I get a really nasty WhatsApp from you in return, because it's Fat David. Because if we go back to the Stellenbosch days, David Higgs was a chubby little thing, and you found cycling quite late in life, but gee, have you found it with a passion.
Yeah, not a chubby little thing. I was a chubby big thing, I can tell you that much. Yeah, and funnily enough, it was, Stellenbosch, I was there for 8 years, and I never really rode a bicycle.
In the heart of mountain biking.
In the heart of the mountain biking, and then I come to Joburg and start riding a bike. Yeah, it really, honestly, I mean, you can probably hear the rain around us, but I'd spent 2 hours in the rain riding this morning, and at one stage I did think to myself, what are you doing? And then when I got home, I realized, okay, that's what I'm doing. And it really is my escape. I think, but what people don't understand about Marble Hospitality, we are now 1,000 strong, 1,000 people strong, our team, and we serve over 1,000 people a day. So I'm constantly in touch and in contact with people, and the one thing that I love, even going to Cape Town, for Marble Cape Town now, I love coming home. I love coming home, to my dog Carlos, and just spending time in my house. Something that I've built. I got to Joburg 15 years ago with a Hilux bakkie that wasn't paid for, and a carpet and a few other things, and so I'm very proud of my home, and I love my home. So coming home to the solitude and the nothingness. I posted something on Instagram the other day, where it just I love, you become quite selfish with your alone time, but it's important to me.
You've also, I think you're proving my point that cycling through four ways, for instance, or along William Nicholl is far superior to spending time out on the trails through the vineyards of Stellenbosch. So we'd just like to make that point very clear where South Africa's greatest cycling is. It is one outlet. There is another outlet, and it's again where we share a love of the same thing. Bicycles, not so much, but travel. And every year, and I love it because you bombard me with stuff from wherever you've gone, and it is photos of food and of wine and of people that you've discovered in a small Sicilian village or a little back corner of Spain. And I think you have to do that, because if you don't separate yourself entirely, you will still be connected to this world here, and the shops and the restaurants and the people. And for your own sanity, that really is the great David Higgs escape every year.
It's incredible, and there's no better way than on a bicycle. So I've done the north of Italy, in the Dolomites, a few years in Tuscany, in beautiful Tuscany. But I found my groove. Sicily was incredible. I'll come back to Sicily in a second, because it was the ocean, which I love. Part of the relaxation, and now Majorca, which I'm going back to now in a couple of weeks' time. But Sicily was amazing. The first day that I got there, I got onto the bike, and that's always I do a long ride, and it helps me detach from everything, and I could smell the wild fennel on the side of the road, as the bike brushes up. We get it with the fynbos and the siervegies in Cape Town. You get that sour smell from the fynbos, which is incredible. But there, it's the fennel. You're cycling past pistachio plants and orchards, or what do you call it? Pistachio. What is it? An orchard?
A lot of pistachios.
Yeah. Lemons. Everything that makes Sicily what it is, you go past. And that's the beauty of a bicycle. It's a lot slower. You smell.
Speak for yourself.
Smell the roses. and yeah, I think that's the best part of the travel. And then when I make reservations, and I usually go for 3-4 weeks at a time. Of late, because I can afford to. And I always make reservations based on wine lists, more so than local food. Because if you get a good local wine list, you're going to get good local food, and not always vice versa. I love experiencing wine, and that's why Sicilian wine has become so good to me. And that's the reason I went to Sicily. Was I tasted it in Rome, and sort of went to Sicily because of that. But and then. People always say, but you keep going back to the same place, or well, sort of becomes a little bit like home. I don't have to worry too much, and that's where the anxiety kicks in again. I'm there for 4 weeks. Why don't I go then to Palermo or to Ortigia or wherever it is? No, I'm happy to lay wherever I lay my hat. That's my home. So I leave all my stuff there, and I just enjoy it for what it is, and find my little beach that I like to go to, and find my little a few restaurants, like 4 or 5 restaurants. The staff get to know me. I don't have to book. They just it's just me. They put me in a corner somewhere, and they know that I appreciate it. And then that's what makes my holiday.
I think there's also quite a strong link between David Higgs, the chef of the last 10 years or so, and the food that you're finding over there, because you're a person who can, as you made very evident in Ruston Freda and at the Saxon, you can make these ornate 6,000 ingredient, 42 course tasting menus, and they will be supreme and sublime and wondrous. But the shift over to marble, there was a lot more simplicity to the approach and to the food that you felt you really wanted to make. And I spend enough time in the Mediterranean, particularly Greece, with the family, where you're getting dishes that are 4, 5, 6 ingredients, and yet because of that freshness and that expert ability to bring things together, you're getting such amazing food. I think that reflects exactly where you are now as a chef.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if you for me, the eating is experiential, and when I'm eating, and that's why I love eating alone. I like to be left alone. I don't like interruptions at tables, and especially when there's a conversation going on. Like I don't like that interruption. So, and I think a lot of people do. So, or don't, should I say? So that meal, whether you have 1 or 2 courses or whatever. Like I like to experience that meal, that piece of meat for what it is, you know, and you make a lot more people happy than you do in a 20 or 30 seater restaurant where, you know, I feel like I'm feeding the nation now, you know, like I'm feeding everybody now. It's not so
It's not so exclusive.
it's not so exclusive, you know. Everybody has access to it, and that's the beauty of Marble, is that we cater for everybody, and I love that. And yeah, so I'm in a much better space. I'm in a creatively, I'm a bit worn at the moment. I'm not gonna lie, but you know, that's why the holidays are good, and you come back inspired and get going again, you know.
One of my favourite evenings of last year was at Zoo, which, if you haven't been, another of David's splendid homes of great food. Often a Pan-Asian kind of influence, but we had a very different night there because you came back with dishes inspired by your time in Italy. It was an evening with Ard Matthews, who's a great storyteller, wonderful musician, and still probably the worst dressed person in South Africa. And you guys gave us a night of great magic, and there was such delight on your face as you threw back with recent nostalgia to where you'd been and why the trip had inspired the dishes that you gave us that night. And what I loved about that in particular was getting a glimpse of David Higgs, the chef, again, because there's a large part of what you do that is kind of David Higgs, the CEO, David Higgs, the chief marketing officer, as opposed to rolling up your sleeves and being in the kitchen all of the time, which is at the heart of all. Yes, you've done so well, and I know you're very proud of the success, and rightfully so. But is there a part of David that would like to be in the kitchen a little more, would like to be rolling those sleeves up and just sitting over the stove?
Generally, yes, Dan. To be honest with you, I do. Until I get into the kitchen with those bloody fires, I can tell you that much. It's just, I don't know how those guys do it, you know. So no, you know what I do often now, and what I enjoy immensely is I love cooking at home. I have recently redone my home and sort of just, like I said, made it my own, but I haven't done my kitchen yet, and I'm still struggling because I'm trying to get a fire into the kitchen. I want a little fireplace in the kitchen where I can cook, but I love cooking at home, and for me the casseroles are everything. So this time of the year, you know.
So what are you making? Like, if today's a rainy, cold Johannesburg day, it feels like we're in Scotland at the moment. So you get home. Most people think, right, well, you're probably searing a few lobsters, putting it on top of a truffled risotto. But what are you actually making?
So I made a lovely lamb brie the other day. So lamb knuckle, you know, cut really small, and loads of cabbage, loads of white pepper, and then finish it off with dombolo, that from the Lazy Makoti's recipe. You know, she does a lovely steamed dumpling that you just pop in, and there's nothing better than that because it's the bones, you know, the meat, the cabbage. You can see how excited I get. Just knock the flipping microphone again. But yeah, that's how I like to eat, you know.
Proper comfort eating.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, you know. Yeah.
Well, I know this because my Greek mother-in-law is an expert in the art of comfort food, which really is Greek food, essentially. And you have destroyed it gleefully when given half a chance, as we all do, because she is that good. She does food made with love, and that's always the best food. When you look at the travels, when you look at the adventures, Italy's obviously had a huge impact. Is that the place, if you had to say, right, I'm going to settle down somewhere else and just based on the food, is Italy top of the list for you?
I'm thinking Spain, probably.
Yeah.
I love the diversity of Spain. You know, from the paellas to the meat to the. I find it slightly lighter eating, but I love the history of Italy, man. The cities, when you walk into these little walled cities of Lucca, or the breathtaking Rome. You know, you walk around the corner and there's the Colosseum. You know, it's like, yeah, do me a favor. And it was that unexpected. I was like ambling through the streets, and my word, there it is.
Look,
you know,
here's an unfinished football stadium.
So I you know, anything on the Mediterranean. I've never been to Greece. I'll probably fall in love with that. You know.
Oh, you will.
But I know the lifestyle. You know, and I know how I feel when I'm at the water. I know how I feel when I'm eating, and I know how I feel when I'm riding my bike. However, the one thing, and you've heard me say this before, the one thing that you must never do is try and recreate that at home. I always love this because so many people tell the story. You go to. I'm sitting in Tuscany. I'm drinking what I think is the best wine I've ever had in my entire life.
You bring a
I
bottle.
decided to bring a case home, at great expense and difficulty, and everybody's around the Sunday lunch table, and it's just so average, and there's a lot to be said for that, when you're in a country, just appreciate it for what it is, try and forget about everything that goes on around you, and enjoy it, and don't try and recreate it elsewhere. Just
there's a great term with wine, the term terroir, which mostly is used to explain the soil from which the grapes come. But I like to take terroir and extend it to the sense of place of that wine and have the wine in that space on the estate or in the village.
Absolutely.
Or it's like a lot of Greek wine. I bought some of my wife's uncle's wine home. Drink that wine in the village. It is glorious. Drink it back home, and I think we were all hospitalised for 4 days. No, it's just it lacks some of that charm, but it is a big part of travel. There is one other place, though, as we wrap up, that you and I have spoken of a lot. I have promised to take you to Greece, and we will do that. And you will fall in love with Greece because there is an enchantment to it that is difficult to describe, but is incredibly easy to feel. But the other place is somewhere you've promised to take me, and we are going to do this. And this is the origin story of David Higgs, because for all the success in South Africa, for all the adventures in Europe, for all the other travel you've done, ultimately, sitting across from me is a kid from Namibia who will never lose that sense of history, that sense of where you come from. And again, I mentioned a moment ago that joy and delight when you spoke about cooking and that Italian night. I get the same from you when you talk about Namibia and the upbringing and the life that you had in what was a very unspoiled, very natural part of the world.
Absolutely.
And it has formed so much of who David Higgs still is today.
Yeah, and sadly, just haven't been back for a while, and a large part of that is just to try and detach myself from everything that goes on here, and it's just almost too close to home at times, But you have to understand, there is nothing. The front cover of Mile 8 is exactly my medicine. It's sitting on those long stretches of beach, of ocean, with that ice cold Atlantic on your face and that hot desert sun on your back. And I can't explain that to anybody. It's the most beautiful feeling, and it's desolate and it's cold and it's rugged. But yes, man, I would never trade that for anything in the world. And if things were any different, I'd possibly find myself there again, but that's food for my soul, that is.
I'm waiting for news of the Pantry Volvus Bay to open up, or Marble Luderitz, or
Swakopmund, probably.
I have been to Swakopmund. It is lovely, but I would love to see it through your eyes, and we will do that. So that's the deal to finish off. For you to take me to Namibia, I'll take you to Greece, and we can compare notes and enjoy.
Yeah, I think possibly with both those countries to leave the wine as a side topic and focus on the food.
Well, I tell you, I haven't had much Namibian wine, if such a thing exists, but no country in the world has improved its wine as much as Greece in the last decade. When I first drank Greek red wine on a flight from Munich to Athens, it was very clearly on board in case they ran out of fuel because they were interchangeable, and the amount of time and money they've put into uplifting wine in Greece has been staggering. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and I shall happily be your guide.
Excellent.
David Higgs, thank you for so much. Many years of wonderful friendship, many great adventures together, wonderful meals, great bottles of wine, misadventure on Instagram, and keep going. But enjoy the break, because I don't think people always realise and understand that behind all the glamour of having the best restaurants in the country does come 28-hour days, 8-day weeks, 35-day months, and it is pretty relentless, even if, as I know for a fact, it's now almost 20 years since you last had to wash a dish. So there are some benefits being the top man. But congratulations and thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
There we go. David Higgs, not just one of South Africa's favourite chefs, he is one of South Africa's favourite personalities, and quite possibly the single greatest highly qualified chef amateur cyclist on the planet.
You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.